Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call it when you've acquired so many types of popcorn and your kitchen's just overflowing with popcorn, and to solve that, you have to implement a complex physics simulator by which the popcorn that you own is orbiting around you in the kitchen, so you have space for it all.
I don't know. What do you call it?
You call it a kernel space program. Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your big week for space host, Madelyn.
I'm your slipped on a banana peel and my head popped off host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning into this week's show. This week, we're talking about Kerbal Space Program, which I will almost inevitably now refer to as Kernel Space Program at some point during the show. I can't believe I set myself up for that. And also Skin Deep.
Yeah.
It's Space Sim Week here at Talk This.
Yeah. Very different space sims.
Yes. Does mean that the ultimate mashup is just going to be like a gigantic space sim.
Yeah.
So look forward to that.
I'll be endeavoring not to talk about how hot it is outside.
Emma is on the face of the sun.
Yeah, I really got into the space simulator this time and simulated myself all the way to the
Emma
surface
is
of the
on
sun.
the planet Mercury.
Yeah,
And the mercury levels are high.
they are. That's why it's
Happy
called
summer,
that.
everybody. Summertime. Who would have guessed it's hot?
Anyway, for the next few weeks, I sound kind of tired on the podcast. No, it's because the sun is siphoning energy from me as we speak.
Emma is the opposite of a plant.
Yeah, exactly. I give energy to the sun.
Photo-antisynthesis.
All right, let's talk about Kerbal Space Program.
Kerbal Space Program is a game that I have no interest in playing.
Yeah?
I just don't feel like it's for me. I respect it greatly, and I just, like, anything like flight simmy like this, I'm just like, that's not it.
It's it's flight simmy, but it's also kind of like tycoon game-ish.
Yeah, but, like, the tycoon games are about money and trapping people in
Well, in this you can
lion
send your
exhibits.
little Kerbals to explode in space, and isn't that kind of similar?
No, because you don't. That's worse. That just feels bad.
They respawn, they
Okay, look,
reincarnate
Kerbal Space
really
Program, hey, is a 2015, although really even as early as 2011, depending on how you want to
quick. Its
count
1.0
release dates.
launch was in 2015.
Yes. Space Flight Sim, developed by Squad, for all current-ish platforms, basically.
Not anymore. It is done now.
Yes, true. But for PS4, PS5, the Xboxes, Windows, etc. Squad is actually not it sort of became a game company, but was not a game company when they started doing this.
Is not a game company now, is my
That's
understanding.
true. Was not and is not
Yeah.
a game company. Such is the life cycle.
Yeah, they're Brazilian, right?
Mexican.
Mexican. I don't know why I thought Brazil.
Mexico City.
But they were a marketing agency, essentially, of which there's apparently not that many in Mexico. It's a pretty small industry.
Well, they were sort of a niche. Like, they weren't, like, designing people's social media copy.
Yeah.
Like, they were doing
Events.
a big, like, Coca-Cola is turning the
Installations.
street into a big can of Coke
Yeah.
kind of events.
Yeah. And it's a lot of work, apparently. It is a hard job.
Yeah.
And so part of when you join Squad at the time, the two founders make a pledge that they will listen to your personal pitch someday, and considered it for the business.
What a toxic thing.
Toxic and, but it's both.
I mean, look, they ended up doing this one, but just the sound of that, the like, if you join our company and work yourself into the ground, one day you can tell us about your dream. It's like and again, look, they kind of followed through on it in this case, so I can't hate, but just the sound of that is very like we're all family here. Anyway, go on.
That's fair enough. Anyway, one of their employees, whose name I did not write down somehow.
One of their employees, Felipe Falange. That's almost certainly not how you pronounce that.
Yeah, but he burned himself out essentially.
Yeah, he was like, I'm gonna quit.
And was like, yeah, he came in and said, I'm not coming in tomorrow. I'm done. I'm quitting. And they said, wait, please, you must finish this project that you're currently on. And as soon as you do, you can make your little space simulator video game here. And we'll support you in doing it. So he stayed on, and, was given some deadlines for making various milestones in the development of the project, and made Kerbal Space Program. And that became sort of their big focus for a while as a company.
Imagine if you hired, like you were working at that company because you loved marketing.
I think they're back to doing marketing now. For a while, it seemed like they wanted to take Kerbal Space Program's success and like really lean into doing a bunch of passion projects, but unfortunately, it did not.
That's not
work.
how games work.
Yeah,
that's not how the industry works.
It's not how the economy works in general. It wasn't even just like games. They wanted to branch out into like whatever anybody wanted to do. Like movies and music and stuff. So,
that's crazy.
Yeah. But it did not end up working out. I'm not even sure if they're still around anymore, but they certainly have nothing to do with Kerbal Space Program anymore, which they sold off to Take-Two at some point.
In 2017. So Kerbal Space Program came out in a very kind of limited way originally in 2011. It was then part of the very first crop of Steam's early access program in 2013, the first 12 games that were there when it launched. And then they actually launched, like Emma said, I'm going to use the word launch a lot.
Yeah.
It's thematic. Yeah. They launched the actual 1.0 of the game in 2015. And it really is what it sounds like, to be clear. There's not really like that much more to it than to say it is a space flight sim, and it is an overall, minus the fact that you're doing it on the planet Kerbin and it's Kerbals and not like Earth people. Like it's pretty much like you are running endless money NASA with mostly realistic physics.
When you call it a flight sim, it does imply that it's like you're just like picking a rocket.
Sorry, space flight sim. Space builder.
Yes, that's what I wanted to clarify. The biggest part of it is building the rockets.
Yes.
Not just like picking rockets to test out. You are making your own rocket and trying to figure out how to successfully get one into space.
Which means, guess what this game is? That's right. It's edutainment. You've been tricked. We're learning about physics. Strap in.
Yeah, it was.
The Wikipedia page is scary.
Very successful. A very successful game.
Yeah.
Like a lot of articles like to set it alongside Minecraft as like something that proved like early access could really like work and capture people's imagination. And I think at its 1.0 launch, it was like in the top 5 selling games on Steam for a while afterwards. Even setting aside all the people that were already playing it beforehand and making their own mods to further customize the rocket abilities and the things they could build and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, it's interesting to think about what kind of games can do that. Like what works in early access. I mean, Minecraft and this, both benefit from being like very early on in that process, of course, right? Before we had decided to have feelings about what early access means. But it's games that have this, this sandboxy quality to some extent. often have the space to grow. Like, if you can grow alongside your players, if your players cannot outsmart you, if you can work fast enough that you're adding things that they're excited about, before they get bored, that's kind of the ideal early access situation.
I mean, with stuff like this too, it's people, even if they got bored, they were adding their own stuff to it. So I also think it's making a solid enough base that people are engaging with it even beyond what you've already put in there, and are in fact putting their own stuff in there.
Anyway, this game sounds too hard for me.
I think that's part of the fun.
No, it definitely is.
Part of the fun is learning about rockets.
Yeah.
But it's also, horrifically messing up in weird ways and then trying to figure out what happened, which honestly, it does have some crossover with our new game this week as well.
Very similar energies in very different applications.
Yeah. But even NASA was really into Kerbal Space Program.
How psyched was the dev team to find that out on several levels, right? One, cool as heck that you made like a space simulator game and the NASA guys like it, right? Like, that's just validating from the perspective of I've made something good.
Mm-hmm.
Although, sidebar, I think it's really funny that these guys whose job is this are like, you know what? And I know they're different. I know this is sandbox. I know whatever. But like, I think it's really funny that these guys who are doing this for a living are like, you know what I'm going to do to have fun? More of it.
It's also like public interest, right? Some part of the reason they like it is because it fuels interest in space travel among the general public in a way that is not dry, right?
Well, and NASA relies on that, right?
Yeah.
People have got to, for NASA to have Congress want to give it money, people have got to be excited about space. So I get it.
I mean, one of the articles I read, which was like, around when Kerbal Space Program was in early access, was like, oh, they're planning to have a manned mission to Mars by the early 2020s, which I do not believe they've done.
No, and they also, I think, said, we're going to land someone on an asteroid by 2025.
Yeah. I think even earlier than that.
Yeah.
Because that was their first like major collaboration. Was they made they collaborated with Squad to make like a special Kerbal Space Program like expansion pack for landing on an asteroid, essentially, because that was like NASA's current project at that time. But yeah, there's a lot of interviews with Doug Ellison at NASA, who works in the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, I believe.
The JPL team loved this.
Yeah, just talking about, like, this was an archived one from pennyarcade.com, saying, like, why racing drivers like racing games. There's no real responsibility. So, like, if you have, like, a weird napkin idea that you could never, like, do in reality, right? Without, like, tons of money and possibly a lot of wasted time, right? Like, you can try out some of your crazier ideas in Kerbal Space Program. And, like, obviously the simulation of Kerbal Space Program, while very detailed, is not as detailed as reality. But you can kind of get a general sense for, like, this idea that you have and, like, what would actually happen if you were to try to make that into something real.
Which makes sense, but still. I still sort of feel like maybe play something else.
I don't know if it was really, like, for fun, if it more for, like, different applications of work.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's crazy, though, to be like, I'm going to be at work playing my little alien game.
A lot of government agencies will, not so surprisingly, spend a lot of time ultimately playing video games for their jobs.
Don't say that. You're going to get people doged. Don't say that out loud.
I mean, why do you think we talked about this before. Why do you think the military has an esports team? Right?
True.
So, I don't know if that got doged. No.
Probably not. That feels like essential. But circling back, like, okay, so it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm excited the NASA people like it because that's cool that I made a good game. And the NASA people are excited about it for their own promotion purposes. But man, yeah, every article about this game was like, NASA loves it. It's NASA approved. NASA. And like, how psyched are you to be able to put that all over your marketing?
Yeah.
Like, MySpace, the space guys love my space game. Pretty cool.
But yeah, while Kerbal Space Program is still out there and still playable, so far as I know, at a certain point after stopping development on it,
which they did in 2021. They worked on this game, various updates, whatever, for 10 years.
And Take-Two / Private Division owned Kerbal Space Program at this point. And were theoretically working on Kerbal Space Program 2, which had...
More than theoretically.
Well,
Not
sort of
now.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
They were working on it very poorly and slowly and mismanagemently, so they were theoretically working on it.
Yeah.
They were on Kerbal Space Program 2, and we're going to do another early access thing. But the problem with making a sequel to a game that you developed in early access is that you better hope your initial early access of the second game still has more features than the result of your first game, right? Which was very much not the case. It sounded like there were a ton of restarts and development troubles and some really ambitious ideas, but at a certain point Take-Two was like, well, it's coming out on this date, you better have something. So they ended up stripping out like everything that was going to make it distinct from the first one to basically just like a really bare bones sandbox for something like $45 for early access too.
Nice.
And then Private Division ditched it at some point, and they moved it to like 3 or 4 different development teams, and then they stopped working on it. I'm pretty sure it's still available to purchase on Steam, but you absolutely shouldn't because it's abandonware at this point.
Yeah. No, it's totally been sold off for parts.
Yep.
Which is one of the higher profile examples of that. Yeah, I think.
I mean, there's tons of games that, you know, like there's tons of Kickstarters that do not pan out. And,
of course.
Can't return your money still.
Yeah.
But that has an implied,
There's
early access
that you've signed on for there.
Yeah. Early access is supposed to be sort of an implied no promises type thing, but less so than a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Because the implication is like, well, it's not ready yet, and it'll get there eventually. We just don't know when.
Early access.
So yeah, that was pretty bad situation for everybody involved.
Well, and now there's a company that's making like a spiritual successor, right?
Yes, Kitten Space Agency.
Which is apparently the company's Rocket Works. They had apparently pitched to be the devs for 2. And so like basically we're like, haha, sue us.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna make this.
I do believe that team has a few people who worked on the original as well. It's not
definitely
like
some modders, from what I was reading.
Oh, I see.
Very active modders.
Well, regardless, it's not like it's like the original team under a new name.
No.
I just heard that there was like maybe a couple people who had worked on the original now working on this, but it seems to be mostly people who would like a new space sim game, making one with kittens this time.
But it's so interesting, right? Like, what is there to add? Or, let me rephrase. Why is wiping the slate clean? I mean, I understand in this case, right? Like, you sort of have to because the original one is now owned by some private equity firm somewhere, basically, right? But if you roll it back, right, to when they decide that they're going to make Kerbal Space Program 2, maybe before we let's be generous, before we realize that we're gonna gut this company for whatever millions of dollars they got for selling off these assets, right? Like, why?
Sometimes it's honestly just because the underlying base of the code is kind of fricked up.
Yeah.
Which does seem to be the case for the original Kerbal Space Program. So I do think part of it was like, well, we want to add all these other, like multiplayer was something that they were considering that ended up getting stripped out. And I believe that would have been difficult to add to the first game, or at least more difficult than just like building it into a second game. Theoretically. Obviously it didn't turn out that way.
Right.
But I think that a lot of times why you would make like a sequel to something like this is because like your base has gotten really, really messy. And you might want to like clean up that so that you can work from a more stable foundation to add things on top of.
Code is crazy.
Yeah.
As is physics.
True.
Just so much here for me to feel stupid about. Another thing that came up a lot in reviews, and that I know was something they talked about wanting to do differently in KSP2, is the tutorials. And I think that's a really interesting challenge in a game like this, and like, you know, it handled like in some ways quite differently in Skin Deep, right? But which we'll talk about soon, I'm sure. But it's always interesting to think about in a game where the primary challenge, or like the primary gameplay, is the trial and error of it, right? How do you balance like teaching the player how to do things without holding their hand through all of it? Like there were a lot of reviews that were like, oh, like of course this is the point of it, but like the tutorials, I didn't understand how to aim at the moon or whatever. And I think that's a really interesting and almost impossible challenge of how do you teach the player how to play without like handing them the solution.
Yeah.
So yeah, just interesting, you know, to think about. In this game, not only do you teach the player how to interact with the game, but like how much physics do you need to teach the player? Like how do you teach the player physics?
That's also something that like Doug Ellison was talking about with this, of like knowing that, like thinking that it was special because he was seeing like a kid use like orbital mechanic words to talk about it. And like, you know, just being able to pick that up by continuously experimenting with the game versus like, you know, reading your textbook necessarily. Or perhaps it's almost like reading your textbook, but there's also a lot of practical component to it.
Yeah, there's aliens there dying who are really reinforcing what your textbook would have given you.
Yes. It can be hard in school to do like labs involving space travel, you might imagine. So this is kind of like if you could add that sort of practical component into it.
I think they did make like a, you know, school's version.
I'm sure.
Well, a shame that this game, you know, has died. I mean, not a shame for me. It's not, I don't know. I don't enjoy failing. Both these games this week, I was sort of like, this is cool. I respect what's been done here. Skin Deep a little bit more in my thing. But I'm just like, oh, like sim games where like mostly you fail? That's not always it for me.
Madelyn hates science.
Madelyn hates science. It's true. I do. That's what you should take away from this.
Yeah.
Me being like, I don't like science.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of science, maybe.
There's some chemical reactions in Skin Deep.
Exactly. Chemistry.
Yeah.
Skin Deep. Big week for space. Big week for Sims.
Yeah, Skin Deep is, rather than being like a simulator in the way that you think about it for like doing something. It's what's called an immersive sim, which you may know if you're a gamer, but if you're not, tends to be like you create like a problem that can be solved and approached in various ways by creating interactions with the environment and the computer controlled characters and the other systems going on in the game. It's sort of the roundabout way to describe it.
Would be cooler if we called these problem solvers or something, you know?
But I mean, problem solvers is too vague.
Yeah,
also,
the whole thing is vague. All game genres are vague. Don't
sure,
give me that.
but if you know what an immersive sim is, not all games you would call problem solvers are immersive sims.
I know, but I want a fun genre name for it. I think problem solver is a good one.
Immersive sims tend to mostly be sort of like first person type games too. Essentially it just means there's a lot of simulated systems going on that will react to your actions. So it's not like you're solving a puzzle. It's like you're, you know, using what's happening to create sort of chain reaction things.
Yes, you're immersing yourself in the environment to simulate chains of events, blah, blah, blah. I get it.
Ideally, you're able, if you've made a solid immersive sim, a player should be able to find solutions that the developer wouldn't necessarily have done themselves.
So anyway, this is a sci-fi FPS immersive sim from Blendo Games, which was mostly Brendan Chun, published by Annapurna. So this is sort of a high-profile step up for them. Like, Blendo Games has made a bunch of games that have in some ways been building to this. Quadrilateral Cowboy, whatever the other ones are called. Yeah, but sort of getting on that Annapurna. Is Annapurna still around? How's that? How are we doing there?
Who knows? They're still around.
It's a good week also for like, what's going on there?
Who knows?
Anyway, it came out in April for Windows.
Give us the lore corner, Mel.
The lore corner, yeah. So I almost said in Blendo, but that's not the name of the game. That's the name of the company. In Skin Deep, you play as Nina Pasadena. Good name. You like work for like you're like a sort of insurance security gal, who basically you get put in cryogenic stasis onto ships and like that are transporting, you know, cargo or that kind of thing. And if pirates take over the ship or something goes wrong, you get awoken from cryogenic sleep, basically to take down the pirates and save the ship. Right? This is a cool concept. Like you could do a lot of different storytelling with this kind of idea. Cryogenic sleep, always a rich mine of storytelling gold.
And all your clients are cats.
Yeah. So you work for Meow Corp, the Manx Insurance Agent Organization. And yes, it turns out that the ships are being manned by cats. So I hate to say this, Kitten Space Program may already be the mashup.
You're so right. That's
crushing to me to say out loud. But unfortunately, the mashup may already exist.
My favorite little detail from reading about it, was in all of Blendo's previous games, they've been more like narrative first, right? Whereas this one is more systems first. But because they've been more narrative first, they've just used like block people, to represent the people. And they felt like they couldn't do that, so there's more traditional human silhouettes for the models running around because they thought headshots would be too easy
with a block.
With a block for a head. However, the cats still rendered in block style.
Yes.
So, very square cats that you're working for.
This whole game is made on the Doom 3 engine.
Yeah. That was also pretty fun. It's what is it called? id Tech 4 engine. Which is an engine that's very specifically made for making first-person games. So if you want to make a first-person game, it has a lot of stuff that you can use to do that. Although, of course, because it's quite old, they also had to build a lot of stuff on top of it as well. Like UI details that you pretty much take for granted in games nowadays. Like, as this is an immersive sim, you're using a lot of objects in the environment, and it's helpful to know which objects are actually interactive. So a lot of games will highlight interactive objects for you, right? Or if you've taken damage, sometimes a lot of games will communicate this to you by having like red effects on the screen somewhere. However, with the 21-year-old graphics shader, this was not actually very simple.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of extra stuff that had to do, both for that and so that it could run on Steam Deck without just outputting a black screen.
Look, it's a blessing and a curse, right? They work with this engine because, Blendo is not entirely a one-person studio, but it's like a very, like, one-person driven studio, right? And he likes it. And it's like there's various interviews where he's like, I've been using this for 30 years.
Yeah.
Basically. So, like, of course I'm going to use this.
I can't remember which interview it was. Maybe the Game Informer one, where he said, like, well, if they wanted to open source the Doom the Dark Ages engine, maybe I'd switch to that. Which is very funny.
You like what you like, I guess. But yeah, in an interview he was like, it's good at hallways, but not open spaces. But we wanted some open spaces, so we had to figure out how to do that. It's like, that's crazy. That's a crazy thing to have to be like... My game engine can't do open spaces, really.
Yeah.
But
apparently pretty good for zero gravity. So,
big
you
big
win some, you
for
lose
gravity. Anyway, this game consists of a series... Oh, sorry, back to the lore corner. Sorry, I got distracted by the, engine lore. But basically, while you're on one of these, waking up on a ship missions, you discover there's been a hit taken out on you by a group called the Numb Bunch, led by... Light spoilers here, I guess, because some reviews were like, I don't want to spoil this. I was like, okay, sure. Anyway, the Numb Bunch, you discover, is led by Xena, your clone, who you made by mistake in wonky space. Oops. We've all been there.
True.
Anyway, that storyline continues in wacky spy ways over the course of about 10 hours, until ultimately, in the end, you sync up and become buddies. The end. So the game takes place over a series of levels where ultimately on each of them, your goal is to save your kitty crew members. And in order to do that, you need to use a combination of stealth and violence and throwing things and bananas and whatever to distract the invaders and free the kitties.
Yeah. What's unique about Skin Deep is immersive sims usually take this stuff pretty seriously.
Yeah.
That tends to be like the
Hitman.
stereotypical...
Although even Hitman is not that serious.
Yeah, but the stereotypical tone, even if you can get goofy with immersive sims, the tone of them are usually not like inherently goofy.
Right.
Skin Deep is very much like Looney Tunesing the immersive sim genre. And part of the way it does that is by adding like weirder systems that interact with the character's body. So for example, if you're crawling somewhere dusty, your sneeze meter can build up. And if you sneeze, pirates can hear you, right? You can also get stinky. And people will come to try and investigate the strange smell they're smelling.
I really like that one.
Which can get you in trouble or can help you lead pirates into traps as well, right? Because you're controlling their movements a little bit. What was the other one? Oh, like slippery floors. You will also slip on slippery floors. So like if you've tried to make like a slippery trap, you have to kind of wiggle your way into cover as well, right? Because you also can't walk very well on it.
Yeah. You don't have shoes, so you have to
yes.
watch where you step on.
Yes, so you don't have shoes, so you have to pull things out of your feet if you get stuff stuck in it. You do have one thing that they were thinking about with this was like, well, there's a lot of cases where you can explode something and accidentally get like launched out of a window, right? And they thought, well, it wouldn't be very fun for the player if they kept accidentally launching themselves out a window into space and dying from,
right.
Being in space.
Yeah.
So your character does have a third lung. However,
which is all you would need to survive in space.
That's all you need to survive in space. So when you're blown out, you do not die from not having oxygen in skin deep. But guards and pirates will assume that you do. So if you get blown out a window, it may, get pursuers off of you while you are circling around the ship to get back in through the airlock or something else. Additionally, you cannot just kill guards or pirates.
Right, it's not enough.
Yes, they all have this system where their heads will pop off and like float to go and be reconstructed in the reconstruction area, essentially. So if you want to permanently get rid of a guard, you also have to take their head and like put it down the trash chute or throw it out into space or whatever. But while you're carrying it around, it will also be making noise and like complaining to you about you carrying their head around.
It was surprising to me that there aren't very many immersive sims with this kind of tone. Because this is the whole concept of like Looney Tunes. Like, this is just Wile E. Coyote, the game, more or less.
Yeah. Bugs
Bunny, the game. But as someone who doesn't play too many of these games, because aforementioned, I don't love to fail. Most of the ways that I hear about or interact with immersive sim type games is reading articles where it's like, look at this crazy way someone achieved this hit in Hitman. Like, the way that I engage with these as someone who doesn't play with them is almost exclusively through somebody was doing something wacky with the system in this game for an article that I have written on this gaming website for, fun afternoon color. So it was surprising to me to read like, oh, this is unusual. Because I was like, actually, this is all I think these games are.
I do feel like Hitman is the one that veers into this territory the most. Even though it's more like serious overarching tone, the gameplay is very encouraging you to be a little stupid.
Well, sort of. I don't know. I don't know that the game itself, like, there's enough of a community around it now. I don't know if you, like, picked up Hitman not knowing what it was, you'd feel like the game was encouraging you to do something silly.
Well, it's got, like, the homing briefcase.
Okay, that's true.
It's got, like, the duck outfit.
You're right. It's there, but not like this.
Sure, yeah. Another thing that they brought up that I liked was, doing one thing can cause a lot of different chain effective reacts in Skin Deep, right? I feel like an example that kept coming up was like, you might get like deodorant powder that's highly flammable, so you might throw it somewhere and then throw a lit match into it to cause an explosion. But then this explosion might do various things that sends a basketball careening into your head and knocks you out a window, right?
Whoops.
And because so many different things can happen at once, it can be hard for the player to keep track of what any one thing has done or why something happened. So there are a lot of like various solutions that they concocted for that. One of which is like almost every object you can interact with also has a warning label on it. Even stuff that wouldn't really have warning labels.
Yeah.
But that'll give you hints about like what to do with this, right? Or the types of things that can happen if you use this. There's also...
It's a smart way, speaking of tutorializing, and this is something they talked about in a game developer article, like a fair bit. It's a really smart way to tutorialize, right? Or plant suggestions. right? You don't want to say to the player, hey, like, guess what? You can do exactly this thing with this item. So that's not the point of this kind of game at all. But by suggesting to the player, hey, this thing is flammable, or this thing is smelly, or guards hate this type of music, or whatever, like, you get to give ideas that, especially in a game with, like, it's hard to know in games that are systems based like this. Like, normally you wouldn't expect, like, you wouldn't be like, oh, what's his agent number in Hitman? I don't even remember.
47?
Sure, Agent 47. If that's right, who knows? You wouldn't be like, oh, Agent 47, like, he's probably stinky. Like, I should think about that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you wouldn't be used to thinking about smell as a system. So all this to say, right, like, because a video game is a video game and not life, right? You need the game to teach you what systems are actually active. And I think this is a really clever way of doing that because, you know, like in any game, we might think, yes, we can jump over the fence, and we can't, right? In immersive sim in particular, it's so important that the game teach you, like, hey, guess what? Like, smell actually isn't a thing we do here, but, like, sound really is, or whatever it is.
It also has, like, when you do something significant, like knock out a guard, it'll do, like, a slow down freeze frame and point to specifically what caused this to happen. There's also a running log at all times of, like, important events, right? Just in case, like, you miss an audio cue or something, you can also sort of see it happening.
Yeah.
But my favorite one was, like, and also at some point, like, we just tell the system, like, stop chain reacting. This isn't relevant anymore.
Well, they talked about that in this same game developer interview. They were like, we did actually have to scale back some of the complexity because for a while we were having systems where, like, you'd do something and then 5 minutes later you'd walk into the next room and a guard would be dead, and, like, that made sense in the game's chain reaction, but there's no way the player could have tracked how that happened.
Yeah.
That said, some very polarizing reviews about whether there was enough or not enough chaos in this game. I liked the dueling titles from Digital Trends and Games Radar, where Digital Trends said not enough chaos and Games Radar said replete with chaos.
I always wonder with stuff like this if it is, like, down to the individual reviewers, like, play style too.
It definitely is.
Like, it does the game have potential for chaos that one reviewer didn't see because they were playing it less chaotically than another reviewer, which isn't, like, inherently, I'm not like, oh, this reviewer is bad because they didn't try to make enough chaos, right, or whatever. I just mean, like, when you have so many systems going on, the way that you interact with those systems obviously will affect how the game seems to you.
Obviously. And that's why it's so important to find reviewers whose tastes or playstyles are, you know, compatible with yours.
Yeah.
Is this game mad funny?
It seems pretty funny.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's mad funny.
We've been playing a lot of funny, or talking about a lot of funny games lately. Humor is on the rise.
The people wish for a moment of laughter.
A bit of levity.
Well, anything else to say about Skin Deep? It is unfortunately something where I'm like, that seems fun. I can't play first-person games. Which, you know what, is kind of a good thing. Having, like, a hard rule like that does keep my games options, like, slightly limited, right? Which is probably good, because otherwise I would play a whole heck lot more games than I already do.
No, we definitely need to keep it fenced off a little bit.
Now, if they added third-person mode,
oh,
maybe then.
All right, ready to mash?
Yes, I'm ready to mash.
Kitten Space Program.
No.
Okay, so all right, let me break this down. Both in space, both simulators of some kind, both about, like, trying various solutions. with like little consequence to failure.
For what it's worth, Kerbal Space Program probably majority does not take place in space.
No, I know, but it's about spaceships.
Yeah. I'm just making that distinction.
You're right. Unless you're very good at the game, it mostly doesn't take place in space.
I feel like almost having like a sort of goofy like space station simulator thing.
So, Among Us.
No.
I'm just kidding.
Like, I guess this would end up being something more like Zoo Tycoon, but like your spaceship or your space station.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like people coming in and out. You have like businesses and stuff. And like they have like weird and goofy problems that you have to solve.
That's a decent idea. We'd call it Houston. We have a problem.
That's a pretty good title. I don't know if it would be quite reflective of this, because that implies like ship problems in a physical sense. You could also be that, like various scenarios where your ship is falling apart in space.
Well, but it's not you would be like on the ground, like you're the Houston.
Yeah,
just clarifying.
I was suggesting a different game there.
Yes.
Where I don't think the space station one would have one on the ground. I'm thinking more of like
I understand what you were saying by a space station. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. That's fine. That's good too. I like that as an idea. I am now suggesting a simulator wherein you are running mission control.
Yeah. I think another mashup would be like there are a lot of spaceships that are falling apart.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with the various systems interacting and fixing those before they explode.
Yeah.
And also sometimes you get hungry or stinky. And the person next to you keeps saying, "Oh, you stink," and like interrupting the messages that are being sent to you.
You know, this game sounds fun. The only problem being like is like air traffic control simulator where things are going really wrong, like what we want as a nation right now.
Maybe it's edutainment, right?
Yeah,
we just make an air traffic control version of Kerbal Space Program and save the American airspace single-handedly.
They'd be like, oh, air traffic controllers usually need 7 years to train, but if you've played Kerbal air traffic control program,
exactly, yeah, you
could just come right in.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I think we're onto something here. Alright, I expected these matchups to be hard, but I feel like those are pretty much slam dunks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're pretty good.
I'm more
there's some cats for some reason.
Right, yeah, there have to be cats. I'm not exactly sure in what... Like, they're pretty easy to put on the space station. Like, eventually you could build a thing where it's like, oh, we'll have a cat cafe.
Yeah. I do feel like it's like an indie staple for some games to have like a mischievous cat come through while you're doing things. So also for like the Houston We Have a Problem one, like occasionally a cat just comes and walks across your keyboard.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and it selects random.
There you go.
Perfect. Well, listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Which game do you want to play more? Space Station Tycoon or Houston We Have a Problem? Or should we find a way to combine them into one game somehow? What even happened to Kerbal Space Program? Do you wish that you had a game that was modeled sort of on your career so that you could go home from work and play a game that is like a sandbox version of your job?
Probably a lot of careers do have that already. For what it's worth.
Military.
I mean, game dev has bunches. So
what?
Game dev has bunches.
Sure. Yes.
Is there a podcasting simulator out there?
Who would want that?
I don't know. Nobody. But I'm just asking.
Probably. If there's not, someone should make one. Yes, if you're a zookeeper, if you run a zoo, boy, do I have a game for you. Anyway, really, if you really want the full podcasting simulation experience, you should simulate subscribing to Talk This.
Mm-hmm.
We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, wherever you can find podcasts. Simulate subscribing so you can listen every Sunday. You should also check out our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat we're about to pull from, and read our blog, and also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. I did those out of order, and I still remembered all of my lines.
Good work.
It was amazing how much after I said go to the website that I almost was just like, but most importantly. Anyway, Emma, it's your side quest next week. Who knows?
Yes. My side quest next week, correct. It will
but what
be
are we
on
talking
something.
about in 2 weeks? In July.
In July.
July 4th weekend.
We will be talking about... Is that right? Yeah, I guess so. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking about for our old game, Luminous.
I don't know.
Lumines? They just announced a new one of these at the State of Play where they probably said it out loud, but I've forgotten. And for our new game, we'll be talking about Claire Obscure, Expedition 33.
Wow. So I'll just sit and listen.
Yeah.
So many people have said to me, oh, I want to play, like everyone I've asked over the past couple weeks, like, oh, like, what game are you playing or wanting to play, has been like Claire Obscure.
It is a big success.
And I've been like, my sister says you need to go into the menu.
You should say, my sister says, I'm sorry, but you have to go into the menu.
Yeah. That is basically what I said. I was like, she says the menus are kind of bad, but you have to use them. Anyway, look forward to more on that in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's it for this week's show. Thanks for listening. Emma, send us off. Launch us off into space.
This week, I hope that no banana peels explode your spaceship.